Hey, how you doing, superhumans? Welcome back to our new lecture. And in this lecture, we will be discussing about the two agents that are used in the mobile IP. Although we have already discussed about what are the various agents, what are the various components of the mobile IP in the mobile IP modules overview, but here we'll be discussing about a little more about the agents. Also, you need to remember that there will be a few terms that you might not understand, but you need not worry about that, because in the following lectures I am going to reiterate a lot of things a lot of times, and slowly and steadily you will definitely understand a lot of terms, a lot of complex terms which you find difficult right now. Moving on with the lecture. So in the mobile IP there are basically two types of agents. One is the home agent and another is the foreign agent. So let's take a particular example that there is a network N1. Inside the network N1 there is a host H1, and since this is the initial network in which the host is residing, so we'll be calling this network as the home network. And the router, the main router, which is basically assigning the IP addresses to all the hosts, because there is not just going to be one host in the network, there are going to be host 3, host 4, host 5. So the basic work of this router is to give the IP addresses to all the hosts in the network, and also at times it is going to redirect the packets which are meant for the different hosts. Let's say that host 10 wants to send a packet to the host 3. So at times in certain situations, what this router R1 is going to do, the router R1 is going to take this packet and then it is going to redirect the packet to the router to the host H3. We will see that as well, but for now I'm not complicating things further. I want it to keep simple for you so that you understand everything. So let's say that host H2 wants to send a particular, initially there is no network N2. Okay, so host 2 wants to send the packet IP packet, let's say packet is P1 to the host H1. So it is going inside the IP packet, it is going to write the address as source H2. This is the header of the P1 packet, and the destination will be destination of H1, which is inside this destination H1 is going to write the IP1. Let's say that initially this host 1 is having the IP1. So inside the packet 1, inside the packet 1's header, the in the destination field, it is going to write the IP1. Now what it is simply going to do, this packet will be transferred to the host 1. So this is the initial thing that happened. Now let's say that this host 1 changes its network from N1 to N2. Let's say that the new network in which the host is residing is now N2. So this is the new network. And since the host 2 is temporarily coming to this particular new network, so we'll call this new network as foreign network. And the router 2, which is going to take care of assigning the IP addresses to all the hosts which are in these network N2. So we say that it acts as an agent. This router 2 acts as an agent. Agent is nothing but a router or a host which is going to assign the IP addresses or care of addresses. Care of address you already know, but I'll tell a little bit about that as well. So router R2's work is to assign care of addresses to all the different hosts which are coming to its network. So it is acting as an agent. So I'll call this as a foreign agent. This is basically a foreign agent for the host. Sorry, over here I have made a little mistake. Instead of host 2, I should have written host 1. So certain mistakes that we do, it's quite common, right? Okay. The moment host 1 comes over to this network N2, router R2 is going to assign a new IP address to this host 1. So the new IP address that the host 1 receives when it is coming to the network N2 is called as care of address. Okay. Now let's say that H2 wants to send another packet P2 to the host H1. Now since the host H1 is no longer over here, host H1 is no longer residing over here, I am marking this area as red. It is no longer over here. Still, the host 2 does not know about this. That does not know about the fact that host 1 is not residing over here. Still, in the packet P2, host 2 is going to enter inside the destination field the initial IP1, the initial address of the host 1. We call this initial address that the host 1 had in the network, in the home network, as permanent IP. I am talking a lot about these terms because it becomes really clear to you. Okay. Now what is going to happen is simple. I'm going to show this with the blue color. Okay. Host 1 is going to send the packet to the host. Host 2 is going to send the packet to the host 1. So it is going to use the network N1. The moment this packet arrives at the router R1, router R1 checks that is host 1 still residing in the home network. It finds that host 1 has changed its address, has changed its network. So in the router R1 redirects the packet. We'll see it later on how the router R1 is able to know in which particular network is host 1 now, or what is the current network of the host 1. We'll talk about that later on, how this router R1 knows about that in which new network is the host 1 residing. We'll talk about that. For now, let's take it the case that router R1 somehow gets to know that host 1 is in the network 2. So router R1 is going to forward this packet to the router R2, which is the foreign agent in the network N2. Now router R2 finds somehow that host H1 is inside its own network, so it is going to send this packet to the host N1, to this host H1. This is how host H1 is still able to get the packet. Okay, this much is clear to you. Okay, now I want to talk about little points which are sometimes missed by the students. The first point is that this router R1 is not an actual router in the actual sense, because routers basically have three layers: physical layer, data link layer, and network layer. And in the work of the agent, when this particular device, let's say this is a device, when any device is going to work as an agent in any network, then that device needs to work on the application layer. And since the routers only have three layers, so we cannot say that this is the router in the actual sense. What we can say is that this is basically a host. This router R1 or R2, these are nothing but hosts, and these hosts are acting as a router as well. I hope that you get it, that over here they are basically hosts. These router R1 are basically host, but they are acting as a router as well. Okay, because for acting as an agent they need application layer. An application layer is not available in the router. So some host becomes a router, which is going to assign the IP addresses to all the other hosts which are there in the network. Now moving on further. This is one important point that I want to talk about, because a lot of times there is a question that is asked in the exams of co-located care of address. So we need to understand this as well. Let's say that the host H1, this host H1 moves on to this network, and when H1 host, as I've already talked about, that these routers are nothing but the hosts themselves acting as a router. So let's say that this host H1, when it enters a new network, this host H1 is acting as a foreign agent as well. So can I say that in the new network, this host is acting as a router only? Acts as router, foreign router. I am using this term as foreign router, although there is no particular term as foreign router. What I want to say is, when the host H1 is entering the new network, it is going to act as a foreign agent as well. Now there are two things that this host H1 should be having to act as a foreign agent. The first thing is that now, since the host H1 is not going to get a care of address from the router R2, since it is itself acting as a foreign agent. So it should be having a care of address for itself from somewhere else, the device from which, the place, the technique which it uses to assign itself the care of address, because the host H2 is now acting as a foreign agent as well. So it is going to assign itself the care of address, and it is going to assign itself the care of address using the DHCP way. Now what is DHCP? We will be talking about that in the later on modules. For now, understand that host H1 gets a care of address using DHCP. Okay, you don't need to worry about what is DHCP right now. We'll talk about that in the later on way, in the later on modules. Now third point is that to act as an agent, this host needs a software, needs a better software. First thing is it has to act as a agent, and then it needs to have a permanent address and a care of address. The reason for that is so that it can communicate well with the home agent. So the thing is, when the host H1 enters a new network, and since it is acting as a foreign agent, it has to assign itself the care of address using DHCP, and it needs to have a better software as well so that it can communicate with the home agent over here, as you can see, so that it can communicate with this home agent. Okay, now when it is assigning itself the care of address, that care of address is called as co-located care of address. Now there are certain advantages to that. This was basically the thing that it needs a better software. Now there are certain advantages to that of having a co-located care of address. There are only advantages that it does not need to worry to which network it is going, because let's say that this is network N1 and this is host H1, this is network N2 and this is host H2, this is network N3 and this is host H. Now let's say that this host 1 is going from this network to this network. Now since this host is itself acting as a foreign agent, so it need not care about the foreign agent of this network. It need not care about that. Now this host H1, let's say it is moving from network N2 to the network N3. So here as well, it is going to act as a foreign agent, and it need not worry about the foreign agent of the network N3. It need not find the foreign agent of network N3. Obviously, when I myself can assign to me the care of address, why do I need someone else, some other foreign agent of the network N2 to assign me a care of address? I won't need that. I hope that this complete lecture would have given you a more detailed knowledge about what are the various types, what are the two agents and how do they work. And you would also be knowing about this fact that the agent, to work as an agent, a particular device should be working on the application layer. With this, I end this lecture. Bye.